Okay, and you know what? We
Yep.
don't actually get. We talked about this during the pre-show that we don't often get Christian apologists calling us on the show, and I'm glad. I think this happened because you're here,
Uh-oh.
and I finally I've never done this before. I finally get to talk to Otangelo. Otangelo, how are you doing?
Yes, hello guys. Fine, and you?
I'm tickled. Because I never get the big names calling me, right? Like even Dean Meadows, who calls every ACA show in the book. Somehow, whenever I'm on, he finds something better to do on Friday nights. But now I get to talk to you. I get to meet you. So hi, Otangelo. My name is Puck, and this is Paul. How are you doing tonight?
Yes. So I've seen that Paul made a few years ago an episode on his channels, just a spoonful full of DNA helps creationism go down. Creationism, they claim. And I would like to address that. So my question to you, Paul, would be, do you believe that creating a recipe to make a cake is always a mental process?
Wait, do I? Can you repeat the question?
Can you say that again? I'm not quite sure I followed the question.
Yes. Creating a recipe to make a cake is always a mental process.
Like you're talking about like literally the paper that you get if you buy a cake at a bakery?
I believe he means recipe and not recipe.
Oh, a recipe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, English.
No, that's
no,
fine.
that's right.
You know what? I can't speak Portuguese, so you're one step on top of right. Where I am. So no props for having this conversation in what I assume is not your first language. That's awesome.
Well,
okay.
Creating a recipe is implying something. So I have eaten things that were an unintentional combination of ingredients that happened for reasons that no one was divining. So does that count as a recipe? Because I think what you're saying is if someone deliberately sets out to make a cake, for example, then yes, that is a activity that involves intelligence, but ingredients can be combined to eat a thing that didn't require intelligence.
Yes, of course. You can also make like a random combination of ingredients, but then probably the taste will also not be what you expect should be tasteful, right? But I mean, in the same line of reasoning, maybe a better analogy would be that creating a blueprint to make a machine for a specific purpose always requires a mental process. Would you agree with that?
If you're specifically talking about a blueprint, again, that's you're bringing in, you're saying, are designed things designed? And I think that's easy to agree to. Are designed things designed? Yes.
No, when we are talking about like a machine that has a specific purpose and you make a blueprint to have that machine, then we can infer logically that the cause of that blueprint, who instantiates that blueprint, must be someone with intelligence, which has an intent, which has foresight, and which has a reason to make that blueprint in order to have that machine with a specific purpose. I think we can agree on that, right?
Well, if you find the actual blueprint, then you would be able to, that would be one way to demonstrate that something was designed for a specific purpose. But the other thing is that, of course, we can use things we can get functionality out of things that are not for the thing it was designed for. It might not even be a thing that was designed. So pardon me for hedging. I'm a little wary about where you're heading with this.
Yeah, me too. But let's see what you got.
But I'm agreeing with you that designed things are designed. So yeah. if you're trying to identify, is this stick designed to open a bottle, or did it just happen to be able to open a bottle? Presenting a blueprint would be one way to differentiate between a designed thing and a non-designed thing.
Yeah, and more to my interest though. Like,
I am
help me out with this, Otangelo, because I've heard you talk about this before, and I'm sorry that you probably haven't seen a lot of me, so you don't know where I'm coming from and thinking this. But in my idea, one of the hallmarks of design is like we know what we want the final product to be, right? So how do we come up to the idea that any of the end results, anything that you see now, is the intention? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you look at the way cells work, and how do you know that that was the point of the cell? How do you know that
Okay.
the cell as you're looking at right now was the intent? How do you know that?
Okay. If I show you a blueprint with the specified information to make a turbine, an energy turbine, for example, which is made of several interlocked parts, and that turbine has a specific function, namely to generate energy. And you have that blueprint in front of you with all the sizes and the specification of the materials, how the individual parts have to be put together. And then you have in that blueprint also the turbine fully mounted and the instructions how to mount it.
Okay,
And
no,
that's the
Angelo, forgive me for interrupting, because I don't think you're addressing the question that I had. I want to know how you can look at something that we see in the world today and say that that was the point. The intention was to create Puck exactly in the form that he is. How do we? You say if you see a blueprint, sure. Where's the Puck? Where is anything that says that the point was to make Puck? How do you know that the whole point was to make me and you?
With the example of the turbine, it has a specific goal or purpose, namely to generate energy, and it requires a number of parts which have to work in a joint venture together in order to have that functionality.
Yeah. No. I get that part. I get that part. You're still missing my question. How do you know that the point was to make me?
Well, because you see a specific function, a purpose of the device, which is made in a complex way based on several.
Wait. How do we know what my purpose is?
So I am giving you as an example.
I get that, and I'm trying to say, okay, let's like I said, I've heard this, and I hate to do this and fast forward, but we're limited on time, and I hate doing this that this happens to you all the time, Otangelo. I do, because I wish that we could just like sit down and like, do they have ice hockey in Brazil? I've always wondered about that. But anyway, beside, when we look at design, when you see a blueprint, you know what you wanted the final product to be, right? The blueprint points to the final. How do we know that the point was to make me? How do you know that the point was to make the world that it is now?
Well, I am trying to elucidate that by making an analogy, and I would come to that, but maybe a human being has many functional parts. It has eyes, it has ears, it can walk, it can speak, it can sense things, and so forth. So to simplify and to illustrate what I am talking about, I prefer to give you an example with an energy turbine. So when you go to see an energy plant and you see there an energy turbine, then you know it has a function. It is made in order to generate energy. You know that is something which was designed, correct?
And we know that because we have an example. We can see all the process of it. We see the plants that came before that really sucked, okay, that weren't very efficient. We can see the efficiency grow, and we can see the people who were working on it who says, okay, this is the fuel that we have. How do we convert it to the usable energy that we want? We know what the final result is intended to be. How do we know that I am the final result that was intended?
Well, as an analogy to the energy turbine which I gave you, we can look in life, in biology, and what makes actually ATP, which is the energy currency in life, in biology, in the cell, is the ATP synthase, which is in a literal sense an energy turbine. It generates energy, it makes ATP, which is the energy currency in the cell.
Okay.
And in an analogous way as the human-made turbine, it is in a literal sense as well a turbine which is made of at least 5 interlocked parts, and they are all made through the instructions of information stored in DNA. So we have a precise analogy here.
Okay. We actually don't, and I'm going to say why. Because even though it happens to work with ATP currency, we do not know that the point, that the purpose was to design something that uses ATP as energy. We have no indication of that. That's why I'm asking you, how do you know that the intention was to design something that does this? How do you know that the intentional end result is me, Paul, a tree? How do you know that the intention of whatever you say creates was to make this? This was the whole point. Or otherwise, it could have just been, this is what happened to be. We happen to be able to process and metabolize certain foods and not others, right? How do you know the difference between the intention and it just happens to?
Yeah. As you probably know, proteins, they are made of amino acids. These are the building blocks which make proteins, which are, in a sense, molecular machines. Now, let's suppose that you are on a prebiotic Earth and there is no life. Okay, and the question is how life came to be. Now, energy is essential to have life, and there is no life form known which does not use ATP synthase turbines. So that is a question of the origin of life, how ATP synthase emerged prebiotically. Now, as I said to you previously, ATP synthase is made of amino acids. These are the basic building blocks, and life uses 20 specific amino acids which are used in all proteins used in life. But prebiotically, there were over 500 different amino acids laying around. So they would have had to be selected, and that is already an unsolved abiogenesis problem. There was no natural selection. Natural selection is something which is used in evolution, which starts with DNA replication.
You're right. Yeah, no. So exactly. So there obviously is no natural selection until things are replicating.
Right. Okay.
But it's not. We don't. You know, there's a lot of papers on this. This is something we don't know precisely, but there are certainly ideas, and there's certainly experiments that lead us to think that RNA is going to occur naturally given the right conditions, and replicating RNA will begin, and like all that stuff. Yeah, do we know exactly how it happened? Maybe we'll never know because it's a historical question, so we can't know the steps. But once we can start, there is a natural path that makes sense to getting there. And again, you talk about dysfunction. I mean, part of evolution is taking things that exist and starting to use them for different functions. So we don't know that ATP synthase originally came together to provide energy. There might have been precursors to it. In fact, there would have been precursors to it because it wouldn't have been naturally selected for. I mean, if assuming that chemical evolution is a real thing, which I know you probably don't.
You are just claiming gobbledygook here. You are just
fine. I'm claiming gobbledygook.
Yeah. Okay. See, Otangelo, here's the thing. I really I would love it to have the time to sit down and genuinely get to know you. You seem like a really interesting and fascinating person. You believe strongly in what you believe. But the reason I let you go as long as you did was because I was waiting for it to come around to actually answer my question, and you never did. And as much as I want to think that you want to have something honest to talk about, that's kind of a minus point. Now, I'm not going to go so far into the minus that I'm going to assume that you have bad intent every time we talk, but this is like a point against. And so, people in chat are wondering why I let this go on so long. It's because I was hoping that there would be a meaningful response to this. Now, maybe it's a number of things, and we don't have time to solve this today. I hope we do have a chance to talk to each other again someday, and maybe it doesn't have to be quite this confrontational. Like I said, you seem to be a really nice person. I don't think we need to get to the point where we're assuming intent. just yet. But I think we're at an impasse today. Think about the question that I gave for you and see if you can come up with an answer. I'm on here pretty often, and you can find me, and we'll talk about ways to contact me. Otangelo, this was an interesting first meeting. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to talk, and if it wasn't 5 minutes till the show was over, I'm sure we could have had a lot more meaningful conversation. So thank you very much, and I hope to speak to you again in the future.
I may have been saying things that are
Bye-bye.
I was saying things that were obviously, as I said, not proven. Abiogenesis, we don't know exactly everything about that, but we do know that the appearance of design is not necessarily design,
right?
And complexity is not a hallmark of design. Simplicity is more often a hallmark of design than complexity. So when he lists wants to live up, well, there was, X number of amino acids to choose from. Fine. I mean, it's complex, but that doesn't mean anything. So you and I were both frustrated for different reasons.
And by the way, check out Paulogia's wonderful channel to see what the original response was for. And I would also be remiss if I didn't point out Vice Rhino's channel, who Vice Rhino does a number of channels responding to young Earth creation claims, and he likes to talk about abiogenesis on occasion. And yeah, I posted about abiogenesis on my Twitter today too. So hey, maybe that's where they got the idea to call.